God's chosen ones, 10 signs you were set apart since childhood. They were there all along. What if that loneliness you felt as a child wasn't rejection, but redirection? What if the dreams that haunted you, the questions no one could answer, and that invisible friend you whispered to at night, were all heaven's way of marking you? Long before anyone knew your name, God did. Long before you learned to pray, He was already listening. From your first breath, you carried evidence of a spiritual assignment, a calling too sacred for this world to recognize. So if you ever felt too deep, too different, or too sensitive to survive, it's because you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to break through. In a quiet Midwestern town where the roads seemed to whisper secrets and the wind carried the weight of silence, there lived a little girl who didn't fit the world she was born into. Her name was Naomi. She wasn't loud. She wasn't the star of any classroom, but her eyes, they held storms, and her silence, it held sermons. While other children played with toys, Naomi played with shadows and starlight, asking the wind questions she couldn't form out loud. Her teachers said she was a bit too sensitive. Her mother, weary from life and silence, called it just a phase, but Naomi knew. She knew. Something was different about her. Not better, not worse, just different. As if the world she saw wasn't the same one everyone else did. She could hear people's pain before they spoke. She could feel sadness in a room even when everyone was smiling. And when she closed her eyes at night, she'd dream of things that hadn't happened. Yet, sometimes, she'd talk to someone no one else could see, a presence that didn't scare her but stayed with her, especially on the nights she cried herself to sleep. She didn't know what to call it then, but she does now. It was God, not in a church pew, not in a Sunday school lesson, but in her bones, in her breath, in the moments the world forgot her, but heaven remembered. And maybe that's your story too. Maybe you were never abandoned, just anointed. Maybe your strange childhood wasn't strange at all, just sacred. Maybe you were chosen long before you ever knew what chosen meant. So if you've carried questions about your childhood, if you've wondered why you were so different, this story is for you. Let's go back to the beginning, and to the signs, to the sacred, to the first whispers of God over your life. Part 1. The invisible mark. Before she had the words for it, she knew she was different. Not loud, not flashy, just different. The kind of different that made teachers raise their eyebrows and classmates keep their distance. She didn't know how to explain it. Only that while the world laughed loud, she listened deep. Other kids raced across playgrounds and shouted over each other. She preferred sitting alone, feeling the breeze brush her cheek, like it was trying to tell her something sacred. At home, her mother called her sensitive. But it wasn't just emotions, it was knowing. She could feel when something was about to happen before it did. She could sense the heaviness in someone's heart just by standing near them. Once she sat beside a classmate who hadn't spoken all week. She didn't say a word, but by the end of lunch, he looked up, smiled and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know what she had done, but heaven did. When she was 7, she watched a butterfly get caught in a spider's web just outside her bedroom window. Her heart ached. Without thinking, she whispered, "God, do you see this?" And in that exact moment, the web snapped. The butterfly flew free, and something inside her changed. It wasn't just coincidence. It was confirmation. That night, she wrote in her journal, One of those little spiral notebooks with a missing cover. "Dear God, if you made me this way, please show me why." No reply came, but she felt something watching her, not with judgment, but with tenderness. A presence. She didn't have words for it yet, but now she knows. It was the voice of God, not loud, not forced, just there. All her life she felt out of place, like she wasn't made for this world, and she wasn't. Because chosen ones never are. They come carrying questions no one else asks. They feel burdens no one else sees. And they love in ways that defy logic. She began to realize that her presence was a gift, her silence was healing. Her eyes saw what others missed, and her heart held space for the broken. While others saw her as too much, God saw her as just enough for the mission she was born to carry. And slowly she stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started wondering, what if I was never broken, just set apart? That was the first time she felt it for real. The invisible mark on her soul that whispered, "You were chosen long before you understood why, and even now, I'm still writing your story." Part 2. The Unseen Senses. He always noticed things before anyone else did. Like the way someone's voice would crack slightly when they were pretending to be okay, or how the air felt heavier when something bad was about to happen. No one taught her this. No one explained why. She just knew. She could walk into a room and feel tension that hadn't been spoken yet. She could hear laughter, but also hear the pain underneath it. Sometimes, even joy felt like a mask to her, and she could see straight through it. Once, her teacher asked the class to draw a picture of their home. While others sketched rooftops and pets, she drew a pair of eyes, wide open, watching over a small child sleeping beneath a moon. The teacher called her to the side and said, "This is interesting." But she didn't explain it. She couldn't, because how do you explain sensing the unseen? At night, when most kids fell into deep sleep, her dreams would come alive. Vivid, loud, prophetic, sometimes peaceful, sometimes terrifying, and sometimes they came true. Like the time she dreamed of her cousin falling from a tree, and the next day it happened, just like that. Same branch, same scream. She stopped telling people about her dreams after that. Not because she was afraid, but because they were. People fear what they can't explain. But she didn't fear it. She felt connected to something bigger, to something holy, to something watching over her and speaking through her. Even nature seemed to speak her language. The rustle of leaves carried messages. The wind brushing her face felt like a hand on her cheek. And the silence, oh, how the silence said so much. Sometimes she would lie awake just listening to it. Not with her ears, with her spirit. And deep inside she knew this world was loud, but the voice of God was still. In Proverbs 20:27 it says, "The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord that sheds light on one's inmost being." And that's exactly what she felt like, a lamp, a lit candle in a dark world, flickering but never burning out. She didn't talk much about it back then, not because she didn't want to, but because there weren't words for what she saw and felt. The world called it imagination, but heaven called it sensitivity, discernment, prophetic awareness. She wasn't paranoid. She was prophetic. She wasn't strange. She was spiritually attuned. Every time she noticed something no one else did, a tear, a warning, a shift in the atmosphere, it was like God tapping her on the shoulder and whispering, "Pay attention." And she did. She paid attention to everything, because somewhere inside she knew. One day, what she sensed would save her. And one day, It would save others too. Part 3. The stranger who never left. He used to talk to someone no one else could see. Not in a haunted way, not like the movies, but in the way a soul speaks when it knows it's not alone. She called him Ezra. To others, it was just an imaginary friend, a common childhood phase. But to her, Ezra was real, not with skin and bone, but with presence, with peace. He never interrupted, never judged, just listened, and showed up when the world got too loud. She'd whisper to him at night when the house was dark and her mother's tired sighs echoed from the kitchen. She felt the sadness creep up her spine like a cold shadow. When her tears slipped down without permission, staining the pillow like rainwater, Ezra would be there, not seen but sensed, like a quiet voice wrapped in warmth. "Everything's going to be okay," he'd say without saying it. And somehow she believed it. Then came the night the bookshelf fell. It was sudden, sharp, a crack of chaos. She had been reaching for a stuffed animal when the whole thing started to tip. Heavy wood, glass-framed photos, sharp corners. It should have crushed her. But it didn't, because seconds before it fell she stepped back. No reason, no noise, just or maybe something more. She stood frozen. The shelf slammed beside her. Glass shattered where her head had just been. And she stood, untouched. Her mother screamed from the hallway. Neighbors came running. Everyone said, "It's a miracle." But Naomi knew better. She hadn't stepped back by accident. Ezra had whispered, "Both." After that, she stopped calling him imaginary. She started calling him what he really was. A guardian, a messenger, an answer to a prayer she didn't know she'd. Psalm 91:11 would come to make sense later. "For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." She hadn't read it yet, but she had lived it. There were other moments too, like the time she almost got into a stranger's car until a chill ran through her body and something told her to run. Or the time she wandered too far into the woods and got lost, until a voice inside her told her exactly where to turn. It was always the same presence. Warm, protective, familiar, the stranger no one else could see, but who never left her side. As she got older, people told her to grow up, to stop being so mystical, to leave childish things behind. But how do you leave behind a hand that saved your life? She stopped talking about Ezra out loud, but in her spirit she never stopped listening. Because deep down she knew it wasn't just a friend, it was God's answer, a heavenly assignment, a sign that even when no one was watching, he was. And he always had been, but born into fire. She never quite fit in. Not at school, not at church, not even at home. There was always a part of her that felt misplaced, like a puzzle piece from another box. When the other girls twirled in their pink dresses and sang about princesses, she sat in the corner flipping through worn-out Bible pages, fascinated by people who talked to God in deserts, who built arks when no one believed, who stood before giants with just a stone and a strange kind of faith. While others begged to play Esther in the church play because of the crown, she wanted to be Jeremiah, because of the calling. She was drawn to the ones who were mocked, the ones misunderstood, the ones called by God and rejected by man, because that was her story too. No one saw the nights she cried herself to sleep because of the names they called her, too intense, too holy, too serious. No one noticed how she prayed in bathroom stalls or skipped recess to sit in the library with stories about martyrs and missionaries. They thought she was just odd, but she knew better. Something in her soul burned, a fire that didn't destroy but refined. She'd hear adults whispering when they thought she wasn't listening. Or is she always off by herself? She doesn't smile like the other girls. She gives me chills. She heard it all, and she carried it. Not with pride, not with bitterness, but with an ache only the chosen understand. The ache of being set apart before you have the language to explain it. She didn't ask for this. She didn't try to be different. She just was. Even in church, the one place she thought she might belong, she felt like a stranger. While others lifted their hands to be seen, she bowed her head to be hidden. She didn't need lights or microphones. She just needed God to know she was still there, still holding on, still burning. Romans 5:3-4 became her invisible tattoo. We glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. It wasn't a verse she memorized. It was a truth she lived. She suffered. She persevered. She became. One Sunday afternoon, sitting in the back pew while the choir rehearsed, the pastor's voice echoed through the empty sanctuary. Sometimes the fire you're born into is the one that forges your crown. And she wept, because finally someone had put words to what she'd carried all along. Her pain hadn't been punishment. Her isolation wasn't an accident. Her fire was holy. She was being forged, not for popularity, not for applause, but for a mission she didn't yet understand. So she stayed in the fire, even when it hurt, even when it silenced her, even when it made her the loner in every room, because deep down she knew the ones who burn alone are the ones who will carry light into the darkest places. Part 5. The gift that wouldn't let you rest. She tried to be normal. She really did. She joined the clubs. She smiled when she was supposed to. She laughed at the right times. But inside, her spirit never settled. Because even when life looked calm, her soul was restless. Like a candle flickering in a sealed room, desperate for air, desperate for God. She couldn't unfeel what she felt, couldn't unknow what she knew. Even in silence, heaven tugged on her heart like a child, pulling at their mother's sleeve. There were nights she'd lie in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, while the rest of the world slept. A voice deep inside whispered questions no teenager should be asking. Why do I feel like I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know what? Do I hear you calling me in places where no one else is listening? She started waking up between 3 and 4 a.m. every night, like clockwork. At first, she was annoyed. Then she realized it wasn't insomnia. It was an invitation. That hour, the one the world called the witching hour, became her holy hour. Her room, dimly lit by moonlight, became a sanctuary. And in the stillness, she heard what she never heard during the noise of day. You were born for more. You were never meant to sleep through your calling. So she started writing letters to God. Dreams she couldn't explain, verses she didn't understand yet, but that pulled something ancient from within her. She stopped trying to make sense to others and started making room for God to make sense of her. She remembered what the Bible said in Proverbs 2. If you seek wisdom like silver, if you search for her like hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord. And she was searching, not for status, not for answers, but for purpose. That's what burned the most. The not knowing, but knowing. She couldn't explain it, but she knew there was something inside her that the world hadn't yet named. A gift, a voice, a calling, and it wouldn't let her rest. Even when her peers chased popularity, she chased presence. Even when they mocked her prayers, she kept whispering them, because she wasn't looking for permission. She was looking for alignment. Sometimes she'd scream into her pillow, "God, why did you make me like this? Why do I feel everything? Why do I see things I can't unsee?" And the answer was always the same. Not in thunder, not in fire, but in peace. A peace so strange, so unearned, it had to be holy. She began to realize that restlessness wasn't punishment, it's preparation. She wasn't being left out. She was being called out of the patterns, out of the noise, out of everything safe and small, because God never designed her to fit in. He designed her to be a vessel, a voice, light. And while the world wanted her to settle, heaven kept whispering, "Rise." So she did, not with answers, but with awareness. And in the rising, she finally understood. She wasn't waiting on God to use her one day. God had been using her all along. So maybe now the pieces make sense. The loneliness, the sensitivity, the dreams that didn't let go, the invisible friend, the questions that made adults uncomfortable, the danger you narrowly escaped, the rejection you couldn't explain, the way your heart ached for stories of faith and sacrifice, the waking at 3 a.m. with no reason except God. You thought it was strange. You thought something was wrong with you, but it was never wrong. It was written, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." Jeremiah 1:5. The signs were there all along. Your childhood wasn't cursed. It was coded with divine messages from heaven. You weren't abandoned. You were being anointed. You weren't overlooked. You were being obscured until it was time. And if you've made it this far in the story, it's because something in your spirit already knew. I've been marked since birth. That's your confirmation. So now, this is your moment. Not to explain yourself, not to prove your worth, but to finally embrace the truth. You were chosen. From the very beginning, comment below if you've felt this in your soul. I've been marked since birth. And if this story opened something inside you, shared a memory you couldn't name, or healed a wound you couldn't reach, share it. Let someone else know they weren't alone in their childhood pain, because their pain was prophetic too. And if you feel led to support stories like this, stories that heal, awaken, and remind people of who they truly are, follow where the Spirit leads. A small act of faith can keep this mission alive. Details in the description.